Hi, I'll continue on where I left off in the last video. So here's figure 43A, and so Bach says since it was used previously more often, you're mainly going to find them nowadays used when the previous note is repeated. And there you can see the C is repeated, and so there's a trill from above over the C. And then you can see in the next bar, Bach indicates that it's, how it continues, and it's continuing, it's ascending. The continuation is ascending, so it's the C is going to a D. And generally Bach does not include anything absent-mindedly or at random. That Bach is very thorough, and if he says something or includes something, it's generally, there'll be a reason for it. It's not kind of thoughtlessly put there. And it's only when somebody knows Bach, knows what he's like, will they be able to start unlocking the secrets of the book. Because if you think of that title, The True Way to Play the Piano, when you know Bach, you'll know that he didn't pick that title because it was a catchy title. He picked that title because it actually is the true way to play the piano. And so that is what you stand to gain from that. That is how significant that book is. So when Bach includes the continuation there, one could maybe gather that what Bach is telling those paying attention, the little extras that he's adding, that maybe the trill from above better suits an ascending continuation than a descending one. I'm not saying that's what he's doing there, but one could wonder perhaps that's what he is saying there. And here's figure 43B. And so Bach says that the trill from above will as well be used, will occur when the line is descending. And there you can see the C going to the B flat. And the B flat has over it has a trill from above, just indicating exactly what he said there, that the trill from above will occur when descending. And then in the next bar he includes the execution of it, and what you can see there is the two small 30-second notes or demi-semiquavers, the C and B, which B flat, which will be the first two notes of that trill from above, and then going down to the A, and that the first note of that trill from above is tied to the previous note, the previous C, meaning that wouldn't be played again when that second E comes in, but it would be tied, and the first note you'd actually hear played from that trill from above will be the B flat. So Bach makes no reference to that in the text. So this is, you know, sort of a message without words, a message in the example. And one could wonder, why does he do that? Why did he write that in? And the first kind of thing you could answer, you could guess, would be that that is a way to perform the trill from above in that situation. And were it not a way to perform it, that Bach would have explicitly said, how, you know, knowing Bach, based on the evidence of how Bach has been in all these, you know, to date, Bach will have provided an explanation. Were that not the way to play it? So in writing it in, one could maybe safely assume his endorsement of that way of playing it. And if you think of these examples like of B and C, where the trill from above will happen when there's a leap downwards of a third, that the trill from above has a sort of a connecting quality when it's used in this context, that it's filling in the gaps in the case of the jump from a third, and it's smoothing the line, kind of overlapping the line when it's used in descending, so that the tying the note will, you know, it'll play into that purpose, the intended purpose of the trill from above. So that could be one answer one could come up with as to why Bach included that in. And there could be another reason for that, which I'll get to when I look at the pral trill, or the half trill. So Bach, one could, I'd say, safely assume that Bach is saying this is an acceptable way to perform that trill from above, and he might be indicating it that this indeed is the way a trill from above in this situation will be performed. So, but these are, you know, these are the details. This is where the extra information is contained. So it's worth kind of noting and keeping in mind. And so here's C, and yeah, just like Bach says, it'll occur as well when there's a leap of a third, and you can see that the F is leaping down to the D, and over the D is a trill from above. So it is kind of smoothing out the line. There's not the jump anymore. The trill from above fills in the gaps. And so you have a joined line instead of one with, you know, kind of drops. Da wir schon erwähnt haben, dass man überhaupt bei Anbringung der Manieren besonders Acht haben müsse, dass man der Reinigkeit der Harmonie keinen Schaden tue, so würde man aus dieser Ursache bei dem Exempel unter Figur 44 am besten einen ordentlichen Triller oder den von oben anbringen, weil der Triller von unten verbotene Quintenanschläge hervorbringet. So here's figure 44. And you can see in the second beat of the bar, in the first bar, that there's an F. And so Bach, he said this about, in the Appoggiaturas he mentioned this, and so he says it again, that when introducing ornaments, one should watch out that it doesn't do damage to the purity of the harmony. And this as well, just like it is with the Appoggiaturas, this is another useful tool in terms of coming up with the right answer, because, you know, everything one can rule out with a certainty helps, because it reduces the options. You're getting closer to the correct answer. So Bach is telling you, like in the case of this example, you could look at that and you'll have 3 trills to choose from. Trill from the ordinary trill, the trill from below, and the trill from above. And you might wonder, what trill should I use? Well, Bach has given you a way, something you can, a tool which on occasion might actually fully eliminate one of those options, meaning you have narrowed down your options, which means your choice is easier. It's like you know, that, I don't know, in German it's called the Joker and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, like the 50-50 chance. It's like that. So it's very useful. You get to, without a doubt, eliminate one of the options. So you only have to choose between a trill from above or an ordinary trill in the case of figure 44, because a trill from below would create fifths. And you can see that there with the bass line. The first bass note is a B flat. And the F, with the B flat, the F forms a fifth. And then the next bass note, so it's B flat F, which is a fifth. And then the next bass note is an A. And if you play a trill from below over that F, the first note you will begin that trill on will be the E. And so you're going from B flat F to AE, which is consecutive fifths, moving in the same direction, which are forbidden, as Bach says. Yeah, and I won't talk more about them now, because it's not the time to talk about them. But you get consecutive fifths, so you know trill from below. I can rule that out for certain. With 100% certainty, I can rule it out. So anytime you can do that, it only helps your mission or your goal. So he's providing you with a chance to do that. And as well, in the Bärenreiter, when they transposed the examples, Bach had included the signs for the two trills he said works there, a trill from above and the ordinary trill. Bärenreiter only included the one sign, so the original has the two signs to coincide with what Bach is saying. So, yeah, so that's figure 44 with the two versions, and then I can play it with the trill from below too, so you can perhaps hear the consecutive fifths. And there was something else. I mean, this is a bit ridiculous, really. But I'll still say it anyway. But, I wrote in a description of one of the videos, and I don't know offhand exactly which video it was now. But it was the one to do with the, in paragraph 21 of the chapter on trills in figure 33, Carl Philipp said that this was, one can count this as among the more objectionable Nachschläge. And an example of that exact Nachschlag can be found in his father's suite, English suite number 6 in D minor in bar 47. And I mentioned that in the description. And the immediate thing, what I said was, you know, like the immediate response one could have, like, would be, it would feel like a bit amusing, because it's like Trouble in Paradise. You know, you could imagine it maybe a bit of a debate, like a father and son debate, like, you know, Dad, you're totally not cool, sort of an idea. You know, that Nockschlag is so lame. It's so objectionable. And you know, so like a sort of a generation gap in the Bach family between Bach and his sons. Dad, you're so not cool. Yeah. So that could be the first reaction to when you see a Nockschlag in that of J.S. Bach, that his son will say one could count among the more objectionable Nockschläge. And then one could think as well, you know, when I look at the editions of an edition of the English suites, when they talk about where they, you know, the sources they used, what you find out is that they're not actually autographed manuscripts. A lot of the sources they have are copies that Bach students will have made. And so, like, while it's fun to jump to the conclusion that, you know, like to imagine like a debate between father and son about like how cool or corny such a Nockschlag is, one could wonder, was that an addition made because it said in the, you know, with the sources that the students, when they copy out the music, what they have to go on for their editions, that they will have made additions to it. And so one could wonder, was that objectionable Nockschlag and actually Bach's, or was it an addition made by one of the students? And yeah. And how this could be used as well, this, you know, what Bach says about figure 44 and about not doing damage to the purity of the harmony. That if one sees, so if you're, you know, looking at a score in an edition of a piece by Bach, and you don't know, when you're looking at it, you don't know what is Bach's and what might be an edition of his pupil. You know, and some of the Bach's pupils were, you know, there's a guy, Kernberger, and I have a feeling that Carl Philipp was not Kernberger's biggest fan. And Kernberger seemed to have been very good at capitalizing on having been a pupil of Bach's. But Kernberger is not very, very good. He wasn't a good pupil of Bach's. And his, you know, he has a very low standard, but he seems to, you know, everybody follows him. Well, I have no idea how many people follow him. I mean, I noticed how bad he was when I saw his working out of the trio sonata in Bach's musical Offering. It's really bad, and I don't know how many people are actually using that if they want to perform that trio sonata. I've no idea, but if they do, it's a terrible one to use. It's Lilliput to the max. So, with what Bach says in figure 44, if you see Bach, what I wanted to say was, you know, Johann Sebastian Bach will notice such a thing if it does damage to the, you know, to the purity of the harmony. So if you see let's say a trill from below over a note, and that trill from below creates consecutive fifths with the previous note, just like in figure 44, you can then think Bach will not, that trill will not come from Bach, because he will notice such things, whereas somebody like Kernberger won't notice such things, and he'll, happy as Larry, add a trill from below because he's great. And and that will be a way where you can think, haha, that is perhaps an addition, and that is not from Bach himself. So that can be very useful, sifting through, to keep in mind and just check out for. Yeah, so that was the point I wanted to make. And I had a harpsichord teacher for a while, and he was saying how, Bach doesn't have, consecutive fifths, and it's not an outrageous thing to say. And he mentioned some pieces that I can't remember now what they were, but they were like a similar collection, like those suites, lots of short pieces, or like the French suites, along the lines of that, collections along the lines of that. And he was mentioning them for something, and I forgot what it was then. I went to the library to look, and I looked through them all, and I searched. What I ended up doing, I forgot exactly why he said to look at them, but what I ended up doing was searching for mistakes, and I didn't find any. And he had said that Mendelssohn went through Bach's music, his chorales and all these, searching for consecutive fifths or octaves, because he asked me at one stage, if I do the same. I don't, but he asked me if I did, because I guess what the things I was pointing out would suggest that I'm doing similar. But and I don't want to quote him, but he might have said that Mendelssohn didn't find any, which is, it's not hard to believe. You can search far and wide for consecutive fifths in Bach's music, and you're not going to find them. And he did mention that there's one incident where Bach, deliberately includes consecutive fifths, so he definitely doesn't want them. And I can't remember exactly where it was. I'm very bad with names and those details, but it may be in one of the Passions or something, or in some sort of a choral piece where it's talking about the excesses of man. And to represent the excesses of man, Bach has consecutive fifths, but the harpsichord professor was saying that Bach didn't actually write in consecutive fifths. He notated it, that they weren't plainly consecutive fifths, so they were notated like a C flat and an F sharp, which was basically a B and an F sharp would be a fifth. But if you write it at a C flat and an F sharp, it's a fourth, whatever fourth it is, and I'm not sure that even exists as an interval, but it's a fourth. The C to the F is a fourth, so it's a version, like a perfect fourth, an augmented fourth, and a double augmented fourth, if such a thing exists. So he wrote it so it's not actually in theory consecutive fifths, but they are consecutive fifths. So that was the time he did have consecutive fifths to represent the excesses of man. So it's probably safe to say, you know, I found no consecutive fifths that time, and generally you don't. And Mendelssohn found no consecutive fifths, and I think a lot of people will say, you know, people who've learned Bach's harmonies will say there's no consecutive fifths in Bach, and that they're not allowed, and everybody knows that who's had any exposure to Bach's four-part harmony as it's taught. So I was going to say it won't be Bach's. You know, that's a way to tell that this ornament wasn't an addition made by Bach, but rather one of his students, because Bach would spot that consecutive fifth. Yeah. So, and then I you know, I had the example of the fifth variation to use, like I've mentioned about the allegretto and how it can help to you know, determine the tempo, how it can be used where there is very little indication otherwise. Well, in the second last bar of that, you can see the second beat of the second last bar is a G major harmony, and you can see the last note on the, you know, in the soprano or in the right hand is a D, and the bass note is a G. And then the next note is a D in the bass note, played by the right hand, so the right hand crosses over and plays the D in the bass. And what you have in the upper line, on the upper voice, is an A. So it goes from G in the bass and D in the upper voice to a D in the bass and an A in the upper voice. So what you have there is consecutive fifths moving in parallel motion. And when you look at it visually, how it's written out, because the hands are crossing and the way it is with the changing clef, visually it looks like those two lines. You see the G going to the A in the left hand, and what you see is the D going to a D, like downward, so it looks like the voices are going in contrary motion. So visually you wouldn't spot that consecutive fifth, because it looks like the voices are moving in contrary motion, and when that happens, a consecutive fifth or octave is impossible. But because the right hand is crossing over, what you have is, you know, the G and the D is the first fifth, and it goes straight to the D and an A. So what you have is consecutive fifths moving in similar motion. So here's the first fifth, and here's the second fifth. And so you have forbidden consecutive fifths exactly there in that variation. The only way you can recognize it, like, yeah, you won't visually, you won't see it, but you'll hear it. So there's Bach having forbidden consecutive fifths. And that, like, I don't know how that affects what I was saying there, how you can use it to maybe weed out the additions made by students, or as an extra. The value of it in terms of not doing damage to the purity of the harmony is still the most value, and it's a great way to narrow down your choice and to avoid doing things that will damage your singing line. But this other one, I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Like when you have people like Mendelssohn searching, like scouring his music in search of parallel fifths, consecutive fifths. And I'm not even looking for them. And honestly, this consecutive fifth here is rather like a speed bump, or it's a hiccup. I mean, what are the odds? That's something I was saying as well about the right answer, or the evidence popping up everywhere. I mean, it's just amazing how evidence pops up. And that in terms of Bach, like Bach will make the least mistakes of maybe any composer. I mean, Mozart and Beethoven, they'll be aspiring to Bach's. Carl maybe will make less mistakes than his father. But Carl's music is not as accessible as his father's music because, like I said before, Bach provides plenty of currency for those who only deal in notes. So, and because it's so, you can treat the piano like a typewriter and type away, and it all works out so smoothly with Bach's music. It's great. You can once you learn the notes, you start playing with the metronome. You can run away. You can run away with the notes. You have more currency than you know what to do with. So you starts getting out of control. Carl's music is not so easy. It's not so accessible for if you only deal in notes, because there's not enough notes. They're not continuous enough. There's too much variation. So he's not going to be so popular with, those in the cage. This is perfect. When you deal with Bach on the level of notes, it's perfect cage activity. Carl's music is not good for Lilliput teachers who the only means at their disposal is to tell you to practice with the metronome or count out loud or practice hands separately or break it up into rhythms. All these things and volume control. They take those things away from those professors. They have nothing to work with. So Can't remember what I was saying. Yeah, no, I just thought I'd point it out for disclosure, full disclosure in a way. The idea, I'm not here, you know, I'm not here to lie to you. That's not why I decided to try YouTube. So, while I was gonna say Bach wouldn't do it, and I still think he wouldn't, because, you know, when it's the actual singing line, or when it can be kind of a bit more buried in, you know, with all the factors of the leap, the crossing over, and the speed, it can be overlooked, or it just wasn't important enough that he thought, yeah, it's not great, but it's not tragic, I'll leave it. Bach could have thought that. But yeah, there you have a consecutive fifth. Probably the worst time to find one for me. Yeah, so that second point, you can take it for what it is, and either way, whether it's an addition by the student or not, it's still a good argument in your defense not to do it like it's been written in the score, if it does damage to the purity of the harmony. Okay, so that was the trill from above. It was not so much, but still you got two very useful tools that you can put in your tool belt as an interpreter, as somebody who's looking for the truth, the correct answer. And points of view that help you build your case to support your decision. And in the next videos, I'll be looking at the prol trill, or the half trill, and everything that rears its ugly head in connection to that. So I'd be very happy if you were to tune in. Thanks. Bye.